Football, the beautiful game. I love it, and I hate it. One thing has always been true though, my love of football has always been inextricably linked with my love of video games. I'm pretty sure the first game that I ever actually owned was FIFA 2000 on the PS1. In fact, I still have it sitting behind me on a shelf there. I was absolutely obsessed with it. In that phase of my childhood, I would have been like 7 or 8. All I wanted to do all the time was go outside and play actual football. If it was raining or my friends were busy or whatever, I stayed inside and played fake football on the PlayStation instead. Now I just sit in a dark room like 95% of the time.
Hello darkness, my old friend.
And as I get older, my love of football games only intensified. I was always more of a FIFA guy than a PES or Pro Evo fan. FIFA would also always release around my birthday every year, so I would like take the day off work or take a long weekend and just no life the game for a few days. Even as the years went on and the focus of the game switched more towards live service, loot box nonsense, I was still pretty hardcore into it. There would always be maybe 2 or 3 windows during a given year where FIFA would become like the main thing that I played. Anytime I could get in front of the console, I'd be playing matches in Ultimate Team. And then when I couldn't get in front of the console, I would use the app to trade and shit on the Ultimate Team market. Eventually though, just before it switched from being FIFA to EA FC, something kind of broke in me. I'd been playing FIFA 23 pretty seriously for a while, and I'd gotten to the point where I was probably the best that I'd ever been at the game and was pretty competitive in FUT Champs. But then one day I just kind of suddenly realised that it was making me fucking miserable. The never-ending progression treadmill of Ultimate Team was consuming my life. I was having to follow whatever content was dropping at 6 PM every day, researching what was coming and trading and investing and stuff to build up coins I needed to sustain my team. I was grinding squad battles for weekly rewards. Sometimes I'd need to play division rivals to qualify for FUT Champs. And then the way my schedule normally worked out would be over the course of a Friday or Saturday night, I would need to play 30 games of FUT Champs. Even just those 30 games, that's over 10 hours of FIFA, just on the games alone, not counting, breaks or time you spend doing other content. And then the problem becomes if you miss a week, you fall behind in the power curve, so your experience over the next week or so while you try and catch up is fucking miserable as well because you're getting smashed by everyone. And of course, the game's purposefully designed to make you feel that way because EA want you to fall behind so that you spend money to try and catch up. And as I say, eventually I just get tired of it and something snapped in my brain. It wasn't even really the grind that got to me after all that. It was the fact that after doing all this grinding and putting in all this effort, the act of playing the game just wasn't fun. You'd play 30 FUT Champs games over the course of the weekend and like 25 of them would be against the sweatiest little rat fucks using the most annoying, like, park the bus counter-attack tactics with fucking 5 at the back and full-backs at centre-back. And they would just do everything possible to make the game as unfun as it possibly could be. Then you would concede a last-minute goal to one of these little morons, and then that would mean you would miss out on the good tier of rewards that you actually wanted, and that was actually the purpose for this whole thing in the first place. So then I'd be like, great, I spent 12 hours over the course of 2 days of my weekend playing FIFA. I have nothing to show for it. Now I'm going back to work on Monday, and instead of feeling relaxed and recharged, I'm fucking furious and miserable at how I've wasted my free time. So I just stopped. I just put the game down and I've never went back to it. And football games, which had been up until that point a pretty big part of my life, just basically ceased to exist for me. Until now. Oh wait, what? We can't do the Rocky thing? Oh, we don't have the rights to the music? Oh, okay. Over the Easter weekend, I got into the beta for a new upcoming football game called REMATCH, and I'm really excited to talk about it because honestly, I'm kind of obsessed with it. If you're like me and you'd sort of fallen out of the space because you didn't like where EA taking their game and there was no real alternative, I think there might be something here for you. First, let me explain a little bit about what Rematch is, because although it is a football game, it goes for a completely different take on the genre than an EAFC or a Pro Evolution Soccer even. Rematch is the new game from Slowclap, who you may or may not know were the makers of Absolver and Sifu. It was revealed during the Game Awards in December, and a lot of people, myself included, found it a bit surprising because it seemed to be a bit of a departure from what Slowclap had done previously. Their first game, Absolver, was a bit of an esoteric fighting game, and Sifu was a roguelite martial arts game that very much felt like an evolution of Absolver. So for Slowclap to come out the blue with a 5v5 online multiplayer football game felt a bit bizarre. If you've actually played Sifu in particular, you can actually see some of that DNA in Rematch in the way the characters look and in the way it's sort of mechanically unique. So what actually is Rematch? Well, as I said, it's an online multiplayer football game. I'll stress again that what I played was a beta version of the game, and so things are subject to change. However, if you look on Slowclap's official FAQ for the game, it does say there are currently no concrete plans to implement any sort of single player campaigny type stuff. I know for some people that's maybe a bit of a deal breaker, so if that's the case for you, fair dues. Whereas the objective of like an EAFC, other than stripping you of every last penny that you own, is to sort of recreate the professional elite level experience of football. Rematch takes a completely different and a much more arcadey approach. Rather than full 11-a-side games with real teams and players and stadia, etc., games in Rematch are either 4v4 or 5v5. Additionally, unlike in most conventional sort of FIFA modes, you don't take control of your whole team. You simply control one player on your team, similar to like a pro clubs type game mode, and all of the other players in the match on both teams are controlled by other people individually online. And the player that each person controls, rather than being a real footballer, is a character that you create when you first open up the game. The beta had sort of three main modes in it. There was a sort of casual 4v4, casual 5v5, and then a ranked mode which was only 5v5. I played about 15 hours over the course of the beta weekend, and I would say I probably split my time about 50-50 between the casual 4v4 and the ranked 5v5 mode. Contrary to my experience in most other competitive multiplayer games, I actually had a better experience in the 5v5 ranked mode for reasons I'll explain in a bit. Now, if you've made it this far and the concept of Rematch is still something that you're interested in, the first thing you need to know is it adopts a very unique approach to character control versus any other football game I've ever played. And whilst that's a big part of what I think makes the game really cool, it did take me a few hours to get into it. So when you boot up the game, I know you might be tempted to just go straight into quick match, but trust me, don't. Play through the little tutorials that will explain what the controls are and how everything works. Spend a little bit of time messing about in the free practice mode just to make sure you get a handle on things, and then dive into your first matches. Because if you're like me and you're an old FIFA player and you could try and go straight into a match, what's going to happen is none of the buttons are going to do what you think they should do in a football game, and you're going to be completely useless. One of the main examples of how Rematch is different from any other football game I've ever seen is its approach to shooting. In EAFC, for example, you can press the circle button and nothing else, and it doesn't matter what way you're facing, what way your camera's facing, your player will at least try and shoot in the general direction of the goal. Not so in Rematch. In Rematch, shooting works a lot more like a third-person shooter than a football game. There's a reticle on your screen that you have to manually aim, then you press or hold R2 to shoot, and while you're doing that, you can use the left stick to apply spin to the ball. And that's a good example of how I had to unlearn some of my old FIFA muscle memory. When I first picked up the game, I was constantly pressing R2 to try and sprint and just smashing the ball about. Now that might sound pretty cumbersome with me explaining it out loud, and again it does take a little bit of getting used to, but it's actually pretty easy to at least shoot in the right general direction, but there's a really high skill ceiling to being able to score consistently. So when you do pull off a cool shot that flies in the top corner or whatever, it's really, really satisfying. You don't always have to look in the direction that you want to kick the ball though. You can press square along with pointing the left stick in the desired direction to pass the ball, and that's helpful if you know there's a teammate somewhere off to the side of you and you want to get the ball to them quickly without having to turn your screen round and look at them first. And then if you press R1 and square, it will play a lobbed pass as well, so you have that option. The range on those two moves, though, is pretty limited. So for shooting or for trying to pass the ball over longer distances, you kind of really do need to aim properly and use R2. Dribbling is also very different to other games. There are no player attributes or stats in the game. One of the main points of it is that everyone is on the same level playing field. You know, there's nothing you can do, for example, to make your character taller or faster or more skillful or a more accurate passer than anyone else's character. You all just have the same basic toolkit. You can customize your character with different hairstyles and clothing items. I seen in the beta the kind of framework for a battle pass type system, as well as a rotating sort of item shop. But again, everything there is cosmetic. There is no way for you to make your player any better than anyone else's, no matter how much time or money you spend in the game. In terms of dribbling, you're naturally pretty slow with the ball at your feet, whereas defending players without the ball are much quicker, and the defenders also have pretty powerful tackling mechanics at their fingertips. There are skill moves you can do, and there's some pretty difficult to master dribbling techniques that you have at your disposal to try and beat defenders, but the power balance overall is still in favour of the defender without the ball, so the chances are if you linger on it, you're going to lose it. There are no fouls or free kicks in the game like a FIFA Street, so defenders are free to wipe you out in whatever way they see fit with no consequences. So all of that is to say, please don't look at the casual appearance of the game and think that it's going to be like FIFA Street where you pick the ball up, you skin 17 defenders and score all by yourself. Don't get me wrong, I've certainly scored good goals by beating multiple defenders and scoring, but the mechanics are very, very much in favour of cohesive team play. One thing you'll likely have noticed from the footage that I've been showing is that the matches take place in an enclosed arena, similar to like a Rocket League, so it's impossible to hit the ball out of bounds, it just bounces back into play off the wall. One of the most consistent and efficient ways that I've seen to score is that, you know, if you're through and goal or whatever, instead of actually trying to shoot past the goalkeeper and score like you would in a one-on-one situation in football, what you actually do is blast the ball off the wall above the goals. This then causes the keeper to move out of the way because they think they have to save a shot. The ball rebounds back to either you or one of your teammates who now have a tap in at an open goal. The advantage here is that, again, the goalkeeping mechanics are quite powerful in that if a goalkeeper gets within a reasonable range of the ball will sort of magnetise to them generally. The goalkeeper's diving is also pretty powerful, although there are some issues with it that I'll get back to, but they can cover pretty much all of the goal. So all of that is to say it's actually pretty difficult to score even in a one-on-one scenario, particularly when you take account of the fact that you need to manually aim your shots, because aiming is difficult and goalkeepers are strong. Thus, it can be often more efficient to try and displace the goalkeeper by rebounding the ball off the wall so that you've got a better shot. And that's just one little example of how selfless team play is pretty essential to winning consistently in the game. And that brings me back to my earlier comments about the various modes in the game. I started with the 4v4 casual mode because I thought the ranked mode would be full of sweaty people that would make my life a misery. And I also thought with only 8 players instead of 10, there was more opportunity for me to get the ball and actually try the game out. However, when I later moved over to the 5v5 ranked mode, I realised I was seriously mistaken. One of the biggest issues a game like this faces for someone like me who likes to play alone is that my enjoyment of the game is in large part tied to how good or not my teammates are. And that means whether I have teammates who are willing to try and pass the ball, willing to track back defensively, willing to take their turn in goals. And I found that in the ranked mode I encountered way more people who at least tried to play the game properly. Make no mistake, there were still a lot of shit players. It's a difficult and new game. It's really, really easy to make quite horrendous mistakes that make you look very silly, so you're still going to come across frustrating scenarios. But in the ranked mode, I found that the majority of people at least tried to play the game in the spirit that it was intended. The casual mode, however, was full of people who didn't care because it was casual, so they just tried to, you know, skin everybody and score and didn't bother defending and doing all the stuff that you imagine dickheads would do in a game like this. So to new players, my advice would be do the tutorials, mess about a little bit in free practice until you've got a hang of the mechanics, and then as soon as you think you've got a decent grip on the game, just go into the ranked mode. As long as you at least try and play the game properly, you'll be totally fine. The game does have like a reaction mechanic where you press one of the buttons on the D-pad and your player will go, you know, good job, or we've got this, or whatever. And I'll confess to being a pretty big fan of a sarcastic good job when someone in my team fucks something up. Overall, as I said before, I had some early difficulties around having to unlearn some muscle memory and get used to the mechanics of the game. But once I did, I became pretty obsessed with it, right? The 15 hours that I put into it, I racked up over the course of like 2 pretty long sittings where I couldn't put the game down. For me, it has that easy to pick up but very difficult to master thing that Rocket League does. You know, it's like in Rocket League, if you're new, you can jump in, smash the ball about, you'll have a good time, you'll have a laugh. But then if you watch a high level match of the game, it looks absolutely nothing like you or I playing it. And I could see something similar happening here where like it's fun for mere mortals like us, but people who get good at the game could get ridiculously good at the game. And crucially for me, because of the unique mechanics and the difficulty curve, when you do pull off something cool, right, like when you swing your camera around for a volley that goes in the fucking top corner or whatever, or when you do manage to beat a defender and score, it feels really, really satisfying. And finally, because everyone is on the same level playing field, there's no crazy never-ending progression treadmill, so that if I do want to put the game down or take a break or whatever, I'm not getting anxiety about falling behind the power curve and getting my face smashed in the next time I play it. And it's not without its issues, right? It is still in beta, it's still a work in progress, and it does still need some tuning, I think. Some of the goalkeeping mechanics, I think, specifically need some work. The way goalkeeping works is similar to how some people play normal five-a-sides, for example, where every time a goal is scored, the game automatically switches who's in goals for each team by default. So that if you're playing a 5v5 game and there are at least 4 goals in the match, everyone will take a turn in goals. You can switch those, so like if it puts you in goals by default, and you leave the box and then another player comes into the box, it'll switch to them being the goalkeeper. So if you only wanted to play the game as a goalkeeper, you totally could. There is no option in the game currently to specifically queue as a permanent keeper, but you have to think that's something they would want to add. And when in goals, as I said before, so long as you manage to get close enough to the ball, it'll magnetise to your character effectively. And it can be pretty powerful, but there are some issues around it. So for example, to dive for a shot, what you need to do is press triangle along with pointing the left stick in the direction you want to dive. But the issue is you can only really dive in the cardinal directions, and you can't do anything to change how far you dive. And by default, the diving animation to the sides is pretty big. So if you're in goals and you've got someone running straight towards you, you position yourself in the middle of the goals. I found there's scenarios where I'm diving to the left or to the right because that's where they shoot. I'm actually diving over the ball, and there's kind of nothing I can really do about that, because if I don't dive, they're going to score past me anyway, and if I do dive, I'm going over the ball, so there's no way I can save that shot. And of course, then you look like an absolute tit, and you get a bunch of sarcastic good jobs from your teammates. As a goalkeeper, you can also press R1 and circle, and you'll sort of slide along the ground. So like if someone's running into the box with the ball, or the ball rolls into the box, you can sort of slide out and gather it from the ground. But again, you can't control the distance that you slide. So what sometimes happens is the ball might just be in your box, you slide out to get it, but by the time the slide animation ends, you're actually outside the box. Normally in real football, that'd be a foul, and the goalkeeper might even get sent off depending on what's happening. But there are no fouls in this game. So what this game does is once you cross the line, you effectively just drop the ball and you've got it at your feet like any other player when you stand up. But whilst this animation is playing out, you're locked in that animation. So if an attacking player is switched on and sees what's happening, you're really, really vulnerable to just getting the ball taken off you. The alternative would be to not bother coming for the ball at all, so then you concede anyway. So it feels like there's something missing there. I think there are parts of the sort of goalkeeping toolkit that are maybe even a little bit too powerful, and then there are some gaps and that there's things you just can't really do anything about, that you should actually have some options to be able to defend against. Those are just little nitpicky things, to be honest. I don't actually really care about them that much. And as I've said like 4 million times at this point, the game is still in beta, it's still a work in progress. So I'm sure Slowclap will sand off some of these rough edges by the time it releases. Overall, I absolutely loved my time with Rematch. It was a complete breath of fresh air. I cannot wait to dive into the full release when it comes out. It feels so good to have a football game in my life again that isn't completely soul-sucking and that doesn't want to consume every single moment of my existence, or, in absence of that, every single penny in my bank account. I wrote this video actually on the Monday after the beta ended, and it's now the Thursday that I'm recording it. And I've been sitting all week kind of vaguely bored because I have nothing to do now that it's ended. If, like me, and you love football games, but maybe you're looking for something a little bit different, or you're interested in an arcadey style multiplayer game that is easy to pick up but difficult to master, seriously, please consider giving Rematch a try. Games that try something unique and truly different like this are pretty rare these days. And from what I've played so far, I think there's something pretty special here that I could see myself spending a lot of time with. And for what it's worth, I saw reporting after the beta finished that said that Rematch had over 100,000 concurrent players on Steam during the weekend. So hopefully that's a sign that it will at least have some reasonable level of success, because as I say, I think it deserves it. Rematch launches on June 19th on PC, PS5 and Xbox Series. I will certainly be there day one, and I hope some of you will join me.